verses 7 through 16. We began the chapter last week looking at we looked at the first 6 verses, but the first 3 verses really establish the baseline for what this chapter is about. With this chapter, of course, we know it to be the faith chapter. In the first 3 verses, I want us to go ahead and read them again. It says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear." That these first 3 verses, what they do is they establish for us what faith is able to accomplish in our lives, what it does. And we looked at that it brings confidence. It brings confidence in the things that we hope for, the things that we are expecting to take place, the things that we have not seen yet. And then we see that it produces results, and that we saw that it's by that the elders obtained a good report. That we, because of their faith, they took action. And it brought results because of those actions. And then the 3rd verse, we see that it brings understanding of the things that are around us, the things that we do not fully understand. We're still confident in, because we're confident in the Lord. And as I mentioned last week, this chapter has a lot that it talks about of different individuals in the Old Testament that had great faith. And really what each of these instances are is providing examples of the first 3 verses. Evidence of the first 3 verses being true in these individuals' lives. When we looked at verses 4 through 6, we saw that of Abel and Enoch, and that as a result of their faith, they pleased God. That they took the correct actions in their lives, and so it brought results. This week, we are going to be looking at 3 individuals, Noah, Abraham, and Sarah. And that each of these cases, we are going to end up seeing those that had faith in what was promised to them, even though they had no evidence of it, and even though there were some things that they never actually saw or experienced. But they still had full confidence all the way up until the day that they died that those things were going to take place. They never stopped counting on the Lord. They never stopped believing that the Lord was going to give the things that He had promised to them, even though they never experienced it. So we see in these an example of confidence. In the case of Noah, we see the salvation of him, his family, and also the animals that were upon the ark. And we see that achieved by building the ark. As well, in the case of Abraham, we see him being taken to a new land and being built by the Lord, being built on God. And then also we see Sarah, and that as a result of that, she was able to have a child, which resulted in Abraham being the father of many nations, and the Messiah being born from him, in the salvation of the world as a result of that. So we see that in each of these cases, there's very far-reaching results because of their faith that, as we're going to see as well, it's identified that they didn't actually receive the promises that were made to them. And it took place later on. So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Lord, I thank you. We have this opportunity to be here, to be able to study your word, to be able to learn from it, to understand it. Thank you for each of those that are able to be here this evening. They made the decision to be here. You that we can be more effective for you as a result of that faith being strengthened. I ask you to guide and correct me as I teach your word. Everything ultimately be for your honor, glory, and your will. In Jesus' name, amen. We begin here, we see 3 examples of faith in the unseen. And the first we see here is the faith of Noah. Verse 7, it says, "By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith." We have this given to us here, and it's talking about Noah, and I think we're familiar with Noah and the ark and the things that take place. And the text in which this takes place is in Genesis chapter 6. We're not going to go there. That is where this takes place. And we see that Noah is told by the Lord that there is the need for him to build an ark. And that the Lord gives him this command. He tells him, hey, this needs to take place. And he tells him all the ways that it's supposed to be done. He doesn't just say, hey, Noah, you need to just go build a boat. He says, you need to build a boat, and you need to build it this way. You need to do these things, and it needs to have these capabilities, and it needs to have these parts within it. And we see that he's told all of these things. And the reason that he's told that he needs to do this is because the Lord is going to wipe off the face of the planet all living things. And that he's going to do it with a worldwide flood. But Noah is told, he says, these things are going to happen. But if you follow the instructions that I set before you, you will be saved. And anybody else that goes with you. I want you to think about the multitude of things that could be considered crazy about this situation. The Lord tells them, he says, hey, no, there's going to be a worldwide flood. And we've had, now, the Lord promised later on there's never going to be a flood ever again. So we know it's never happening again. At least there's not going to be a worldwide flood. There's not ever going to be a worldwide flood again. But let's say we did not have that promise. And we've seen some pretty crazy floods around here, right? There's been some pretty crazy floods in the world. But if somebody started saying, hey, there's going to be a worldwide flood, we'd be thinking, no way. There's places in the world that are so high that there's not an amount of rain that can cover it up that high, fill it up that high, right? Well, it floods around Mississippi all the time, but it's not going to flood at the top of the mountains. But then if we add to this that there is a very good possibility that it had never rained before, that they didn't even have floods as we know them, well, now we've just taken it up a notch. How absolutely impossible that this sounds, right? And then the Lord tells them as well, I need you to build this boat big enough for all the animals that I'm going to send with you. Now, I don't have an experience with doing every single kind of animal that there is. But I do have some experience with animals, and the first thing I'm going to think is, how in the world am I going to gather up all these animals? And then the second thing I'm going to think is, how am I going to control these animals? There seems to be some holes in this plan here, God. If we're looking at it from a purely faithless direction. And then, even more so, you think about, well, what about after the flood? How are things going to work? What's going to take place? How am I going to do this? What's this new world going to look like? And you think about it, for years, it was leading up to this. 120 years. I am positive that Noah was told by those around him that he was crazy. And I am confident there would have been plenty of opportunities for him to, if he wanted to come up with even more reasons why there's no way this is going to work. I mean, I have spent 100 years thinking about this thing, so and what's he going to come up? What could come across his mind? What could come across the mind of people that are doubters? They're trying to come up with reasons why it wouldn't work. There are any number of things that could cause people to just outright think, what was crazy? And for Noah to even have the opportunity to think, this is crazy. Is this even really going to happen? There's no evidence that this has ever happened before. How is it even going to work? None of this was seen by Noah. This is why when it says here in verse 7, it says, by faith Noah being warned of God of things not seen as yet. That when God came to him and said, hey, these things are going to happen, Noah had not seen it before. God had seen it because time's different for God. But Noah hadn't seen it. Hadn't even started raining yet. If it starts raining pretty bad, and the Mississippi River starts coming up, then those close to Mississippi start thinking, well, maybe I should get my boat. Maybe I should move. But if somebody said 100 years in advance, hey, the Mississippi River's going to flood on this day, is anybody going to start taking action before then? We see that Noah had faith in the Lord, and he listened to the Lord, took it very seriously. So he was warned by God, and so he was moved with fear, and he prepared the ark. He took what God said very seriously and said, okay, God's going to do this. I need to start doing what God told me to do. I need to start preparing the ark. I need to start building this because I need to be ready because God said this is going to happen. So I need to start taking action. And I want you to notice something else about this as well. It says after he was prepared, it says he was prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by which he condemned the world. That is well here what we're talking about. Is one other thing that Noah was doing while he was preparing the ark was he was preaching. He was telling people, hey, this is coming. He was confident enough that this was going to happen that he was telling other people about it as well. He was saying, hey guys, this is coming. This is going to happen. You guys need to take action with us. What causes us to tell people, to warn people about something that's going to happen? We believe it is going to happen. Well, we see evidence that it's happening. Sometimes when driving, I respond to people's brake lights a little bit slower or not quite as aggressively as Kinsley thinks I should. But the reason that she tells me that I'm not responding quick enough is because she sees evidence that I'm not responding the way that I should. She sees it, so she says something. If she didn't really think I was going to hit somebody, she wouldn't say anything. moved to speak. She's moved to take action. This is what she sees. Noah was moved to speak. Noah was moved to take action because of the faith that he had. Noah's faith caused him to prepare exactly the way that God told him, and also to tell others the truth of God's word. I think he responded to do exactly what God told him. He didn't change the plan any. He didn't change the instructions any. And so, as a result of that, Noah, his house, or his family, his wife, his 3 sons and their wives, they were all saved. And also all the animals that were on the earth as well. The whole reason we are here now is because of Noah. We continue, and the next one that we see is the faith of Abraham. Verse 8 says, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should, after receive for inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. So let's look at the story of Abraham here, and what takes place. Abraham is told by the Lord to leave his home and to leave his family, and leave everything that he knows. And the Lord tells him, hey, I just need you to go, and I'm going to take you to this place that I have for you. Didn't know where it was. Didn't know how long it was going to take him to get there. Didn't know the condition of the land. Abraham had never seen it before. He didn't know if it was a fruitful land. He didn't know if it was a safe land. For all Abraham knew, it could be a desert with people that would just kill him. But God said, hey, no, Abraham, I'm taking you and I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to make things splendid. I'm going to bless you. You just need to go with me. Now again, let's think about this. Somebody says, hey, I'm just going to start walking. Eventually, I'm going to find somewhere good to be, somewhere to live. Again, we start looking at this, especially if you think about this. What if they were very well off here, had a very good job, they had a home that they had built? They had a strong family. And they just said, oh, I'm just going to start going. Again, we look at it and we go, you're crazy. Crazy. Especially if, let's say, the person that was going was the father of a family, had a family that they were going to take with them as well. That they were responsible for providing for. They were responsible for taking care of. Immediately, we would, if it was just them, we'd think they're crazy. But if they said they were going to take their family with them, we would definitely be thinking, no way you need to be doing that. That's a bad choice. You're going to lead your family out there and die. You're leaving this great job you have. You're leaving this great home that you have. You don't have a plan. Now, even if somebody tells us that they're moving to some new state, let's just pick New York City. Let's say somebody just decided they're going to move to New York City. If they didn't have a plan for what they were going to do when they got there, or where they were going to stay when they got there, or anything, they were just going, we would tell them, that is a horrible idea. Would say, that is a horrible idea. You need to at least have a plan about where you're going to stay and what kind of job you're going to have when you get there. God said, hey, Abraham, I need you to go. Leave behind everything that you have, just all of your family, home. Leave all of that and just go and take what you have with you. Take you to a new place. When we continue this here, it says in verse 9, it says, by faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. And it says that once he got there, he didn't have a home that he built. He didn't know everything that was going on. He lived as somebody that was sojourning or somebody that was a stranger to the land. He didn't have an in-depth knowledge of the land or what would happen there. He didn't have anything that he had learned ahead of time to prepare for being there. And he just kind of wandered around living in a tent. Somebody wandering around living in a tent, what do we call them? We call them homeless. We call them hobo. But let's realize here what's going on. Abraham is being considered great for his faith and willing to follow the Lord to this place and to live in this way. You don't have any idea of the people that were there. But I want you to look at this in verse 10. He says, for he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. The reason that he was willing to go and to live his life in this place is because he was desiring to live in a place that had been set by the Lord. He didn't care about living in a place that had been set by himself, that had been set by his previous family. He didn't care about living in a place that people of the world would say, hey, this is a great place to live. Abraham was concerned with being where God said he needed to be. That's what he was concerned with. Abraham's plan was, God told me to do this, so I'm going to do it. God said go, so I'm going. God will work it out when I get there. God will take care of me when I get there. Abraham didn't have any proof of anything that was going to be there or the way anything was going to go. All he had was his faith in God. So he went. And he took his family with him. I want you to think about this. With Abraham, with Noah, both of them. They were doing exactly what God told them to do. But now let's take them. Let's take their faith. Let's take what God was calling upon them. Maybe even more so with Abraham. And let's apply it to today. How often do we deny doing something for the Lord? Because, and I'm not saying that plans are a bad thing. But sometimes the plan is trusting God. How many times do we deny doing something for the Lord simply because there's no plan? In the terms that we understand. I know a preacher that him and another pastor, they were going to, another preacher, they were being led by the Lord to go and start a church in the city. And the sending church didn't want both of them to go. Because they said, there's no way we can support both of you there. So, no. Only one of you can go. Immediately said, no, God's not going to use both of you because there's no way that's going to work. Well, they were willing to both go anyways and said, if the Lord provides, the Lord provides. You know what? The Lord provided. The Lord took care. And I think there's a lot of things that we just, really honestly, we can define it as a lack of faith in the Lord, as the reason why we don't do it. We need more faith. And we're going to continue through this as we go through. We're going to go through the rest of the chapter, and we're going to see some other things too that are just flat out crazy by our standards. That God says, hey, go do it. Later on, we're going to see Moses. What happens when we first see Moses? His mom places him in a basket in the river. It says, Lord, save him. Protect him. And she was pushed into a corner because Pharaoh was actually trying to kill all the Hebrew males at that time. But at the same time, how many of us would look at that and would say, that is a viable option to save your son? And I'm not suggesting we go and put our kids into the Nile River. But at the same time, it should cause us to think, am I saying no just because I don't have faith? Am I saying no just because I don't have faith? And I believe wholeheartedly the Lord makes it abundantly clear when He's asking you to take a step of faith. There is not going to be any doubt in your heart that, hey, the Lord is telling me to do this, even though there's not a lot of things with it. And this is something too. If the Lord is leading somebody else to do something, if our only reason to say no is just because there's not a plan, there's not something that is just flat out against God's will, flat out a sin, we should not be discouraging people that are willing to step out on faith. Do not discourage them, even though you're not 100% convinced that it is what the Lord is wanting. They are convinced. So encourage them to it. They're not doing anything that's a sin. So encourage them. Don't discourage them. Don't tell them no. God's not telling you to do that just because you don't have the same conviction. I guarantee you, Abraham was told by his family, no, don't go. Somebody told him, no, you shouldn't go. That's crazy. We continue and we see the third person that we're going to look at. There's a lot of time on Noah and Abraham, but the third person we're going to look at is one that may even surprise you when you think about it. Look at this, verse 11. It says, through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of child when she was past age because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now, this is the first time I've read this, but every time that I read this, my first thought is, Sarah? Because what did Sarah, Abraham's wife, this is who we're talking about, what's a couple of things that she did in the process of before Isaac was conceived? Well, first she told Abraham to go and to lay with her handmaiden Hagar, which brought about Ishmael. And then later on, when we see the Lord coming, we see that she laughs and says, there's no way that can happen. I want us to go ahead and go over to Genesis in chapter 18. I want to look at this part about Sarah and laughing. Now, this takes place after the events with Hagar and Ishmael. Ishmael's already been born at this point. This is later on. The promise has already been given to Abraham before. It said, you're going to have seed. You're going to have many nations. And we're seeing this reiterated to Abraham. We see it also that Sarah, here's this. So I want us to look at this. Genesis chapter 18, verse 10. We're going to read through verse 15 and we're going to talk about this. Genesis chapter 18, verse 10, it says, and he said, I will certainly, let's start in verse 9. It says, and they said unto him, where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, I am waxed old. Shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of surety bear a child which am old? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. And we see this taking place here, and we see Sarah overhears this, and she says to herself, there's no way this can happen. I've already passed the ability. What's being described here is that she was at the point where women just don't have kids anymore. Her body wasn't showing the signs of being able to have kids. And so she says, no way this is happening. This is crazy. Not to only mention that, but Abraham is old. Can't happen. But the Lord hears them and says, why is there laugh? And I want us to notice this, verse 14, it says, is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. The Lord says, is anything too hard for me? This is the Lord speaking. He's there present. And he says, is there anything that's too hard for me to do? This is the Lord. I'm going to return, and you are going to have a child. Now, I think this is the point in time in this story where Sarah really realizes that this is the Lord that's speaking to her. Because she does have a different response afterwards. She does lie. She says, no, I didn't really laugh. But I think after this point in time, it changed for Sarah. That she had her moment of doubt. She questioned it at first. Is this really what the Lord's going to do? And no way. No way. The Lord said, no, this is what I'm going to do. And so it changed for Sarah. And this is why when we get into Hebrews, it says that she had great faith. Because I believe after that event, it changed within Sarah, and Sarah said, okay, the Lord's going to do it. I'm confident the Lord can do it. And I really like this, that we have this here that is given to us. That a woman, that the person that started off at first doubting is being recognized as somebody having great faith after. That I want you to realize from this, that even if you have a little bit of doubt in the beginning, or you have a lot of doubt in the beginning, but you then realize, oh, I really actually need to be trusting the Lord. The Lord can still do amazing things with you. It's not too late. Don't quit because you just started off with a lack of faith. Take the opportunity. See, she trusted God. She said, okay, it's going to happen. And we're told in Hebrews 11 that it says that, it's like verse 11 again, it says, and though through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. And let's see the results of this. Verse 12, therefore sprang there even of one, in him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky, a multitude, as the sand which is by the seashore, innumerable. That as a result of her faith, Isaac was born. That's what's being told to us here. Now, just looking at Genesis, I think it's pretty easy to see the faith of Abraham when it came to Isaac. And we'll see more about Abraham's faith with Isaac. But we are told here that Sarah was the reason, was the big part of this. Her faith. And Isaac being coming. I'm not going to begin to try and sympathize with all the things that can go through a woman's head at that age, thinking about being pregnant or giving birth or all those things. But I think I can safely say, and if one of the ladies who disagrees with me, they can tell me later on, but I doubt it. I think I could safely say that there are a lot of things that a woman would be thinking could go wrong with being pregnant that late. And a lot of things that would make it a really bad idea. But I guess Sarah said, I'm going to trust the Lord. As a result of this, all these wonderful things happened that Israel came from it. Brought the nation of Israel. We had this great result that was able to come from Abraham, who's considered old. Here's another thing to consider about this. And we're told in this in verse 12 that therefore sprang there even of one, of in him as good as dead. That's talking about Abraham. That so many as the stars of the sky, a multitude as the sand which is by the seashore, and we talk about Abraham, we talk about the blessing that was supposed to come, the enumeration of being the father of many nations and having a lineage that is as the sand of the sea, the stars in the sky. I want you to understand that Sarah is behind this. We're being told that Sarah had an important part of this as well. It wasn't just Abraham. The strength of Sarah was important too. So we continue and we see here that it's identified for us that they had faith in something better than what they had. Verse 13, it says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth." That we see here, what is identified for us is that they had faith without reward, or immediate reward. That it is identified for us that in each of these individuals, they died having not received the promises. These promises, being Abraham, being the father of many nations, Isaac doesn't really classify as being many nations, right? Then you can even classify that as one nation. But they hadn't actually, even though Abraham spent time in the promised land, he had not fully gained control of it. That didn't actually take place until much later on. Abraham was wandering around then. As well, one of the biggest ones is the Messiah. Gospel. That was promised to them. They were told God was going to send a Savior. Abraham was told it would come from his loins. But he hadn't come yet. It came many years later. But they had full confidence that it was going to take place. And as a result, they saw themselves as strangers and pilgrims on the earth. The reason? Because they were looking to the heaven and to the Lord. They were looking to things that were later on. They weren't really focused here and now. They were not focused on this earth or this life, but they were focused on the promises of God. They had faith in those promises. The reason, even today, that people are willing to do crazy things for the Lord is not because they're crazy, but because they're looking to the things of the Lord. And they have a strong faith. And he continues, and he says that they had faith to continue even in spite of the things that were happening to them. Verse 14, it says, "For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned." They declared plainly that they were looking forward to what was coming. And it was plainly declared in the actions that they took. Noah forsook the life that he had before the flood to follow God. Abraham left his homeland along with Sarah to follow the Lord. They were not mindful of this life because they were focused on leaving it all behind to follow God. Because it even tells us if they had really been mindful of this life, of where they were coming from, they could have gone back. Abraham and Sarah specifically, they could have gone back. Noah could have said, "Forget the ark. I'm not worrying about it anymore." Well, all of them would have lost out. In order for us to be fruitful in the Lord, we have to be fully focused on the Lord in the coming life. Not this life and the things that are here. One major thing that holds us back is holding on to this life instead of this. Noah, Abraham, Sarah, they were not holding on to this life. They were holding on to the next life. They were holding on to heaven. They were confident in what they had not seen, so they did it. And as a result, their faith was rewarded. Verse 16, it says, "But now they desire a better country, that is, in heaven. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He hath prepared for them a city." Since they were all focused on the Lord and what was coming for them because of the Lord, they're blessed for that. And I want you to notice this here, what is said about it. It says that God was not ashamed to be called their God. God was not ashamed to be called their God. What I believe? The Lord is pleased with them. Because of that. The question we need to be asking ourselves is your faith strong enough that you can honestly say, God is not ashamed of what you are doing? Those that have the faith, we need to have, we need to be good. Be able to confidently say, not that they're perfect, but they will be able to say, God's not ashamed of what I do. But if you cannot say that, even if there is a part of your life that you cannot say, God is not ashamed of this. The question you need to ask is, what is your faith? How strong is your faith? Is really honest. At least you're holding on to something that is not pleasing to God. You need to just let it go. Whatever is holding you back, whatever is making you think I can't do it, or I shouldn't do it, or this is too hard, or whatever things you're thinking of that can possibly become a problem. If God is saying do it, then you need to say, okay, God, I know there's these potential things. I'm going to do it. You take care of everything else. I know there's these potential things that can go wrong. I know there's these potential problems. There are these things that I don't understand. There are these things that are going to have to happen. I don't know how any of that's going to be. God, you worry about it. I'm going to do what you told me to do. And I guarantee it's going to be easy. There was nothing easy about what Noah, Abraham, and Sarah did. It will work out. This time we're going to enter into our time of prayer.